In July 1996, a pair of unassuming college students were wading through the Columbia River when they stumbled upon a human skull protruding through the riverbank. This skull, soon to be reunited with his remaining skeleton, would be known as Kennewick Man. Unearthed in the town of Kennewick, Washington, in a region historically inhabited by the Native American Umatilla tribe, Kennewick Man became an overnight sensation once scientists determined his age. Found to be between 9,200 and 9,500 years old, Kennewick Man was one of the oldest skeletons in the Americas. Kennewick Man's skeletal structure led scientists to label him as a Caucasoid, a racially charged term that provided the outside world with the opportunities to reimagine human history and migration from a Eurocentric perspective. These headlines left white people feeling that they deserved to study the remains of Kennewick Man, because science may find new and powerful aspects of their history in the Americas. Despite the white man claiming ownership of these remains in the name of science and freedom of information, the Umatilla tribe felt that they were entitled to remains of Kennewick Man based on NAGPRA, the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, established in 1990. The battle over the remains of Kennewick Man lasted many years and remains to be controversial to this day. Who do you think owns the rights to Kennewick Man? In order to understand the Native Americans' mistrust of the scientific community and their claim for ownership of the remains of Kennewick Man, it is necessary to analyze the situation from, first, a historical perspective. For hundreds of years, Indian people suffered at the hands of the white man. Native Americans were demonized from the earliest interactions with Europeans in 1492. Columbus, in an attempt to rationalize a new slave trade between Europe and the Americas, penned the tale of the Caribs and the Arawaks. Europeans were portrayed as saviors of the kind and peaceful Arawak, who were being hunted to extinction and eaten by the bloodthirsty competing tribe of Indians called the Carib. Despite there being no such groups or conflict in the New World, these stereotypes came to define Indian people in the eyes of Europeans for centuries to come. Another example of historical mistrust between the Indian and European people arrived with the War of 1812 and Indian removal. While the ideal for Eastern Indians to move westward into the new open lands began with Jefferson, Indian removal did not become a political operation until President Jackson rose to power. Jackson felt that the only way for Indians to retain their identity and culture was complete segregation. And in order to allow for this segregation, treaties would provide them with land in the largely unexplored West. Experts describe Jackson's Indian Removal Act of 1830 to be one of the darkest moments in American history. Indian removal lasted from 1830 to the mid 1860s. As white Americans scrambled for more land, Indians were either tricked into signing their lands away or killed by the military for fighting for their homes. These years of struggle, fueled by racially skewed skull signs, gave birth to the image of Native Americans as barbarians and not capable of civilization. To expand on this idea of the Indian as uncivilized and the major influence of the scientific community on the racist assumption, we will investigate the work of Samuel George Morton. Morton's research on human skull grew from his theory of polygenesis, a biblical view of multiple racial creation. According to this theory, humans did not originate from one race. Instead, multiple races were created separately with inherent characteristics. Morton studied cranial capacity, the volume of the human skull, to rank the races intellectually and socially. He also connected skull size and shape with culture and behavior. The Indian brain was so deficient, said Morton, that the race would be impossible to civilize. Statements such as these became ingrained in the minds of people and provided whites with a justification for mistreatment, segregation, and Indian removal. Beyond the social and political consequences of these scientific theories, skull science led to illegal raids on Native American burial sites. While there is evidence of disruption of Native American graves as far back as the 1600s, skull science ignited the desire for scientists and government institutions to collect human skulls in order to prove white dominance. This history provides a context for more modern conflicts over sites such as Dixon Mounds and Indian burial sites transformed into a museum in rural Illinois. The museum was closed in 1990 after protests from Native American tribes over insensitivity to their remains. The museum was built around an excavated Native American burial mound, and its central exhibit was the viewing of all the skeletons resting in the earth below. The closing of the museum sparked protests from Illinois locals, who felt that the remains on the display at Dixon Mounds were part of their history and also belonged to them. They protested the loss of educational value that the exhibit provided. However, Native Americans earned the right to the remains when Congress intervened and established NAGPRA. NAGPRA required any federal funded agency, university, museum, etc., to both provide tribes with an inventory of the remains they possessed and allow the tribes the opportunity to claim those remains for reburial. Native Americans trusted that this ruling would protect future manipulation of Indian remains. We now have the science to prove that the desire for American scientists to prove the race and identity of Kennewick Man is futile. As early as 1911, scientist Franz Boas was able to prove that all races are biologically equal. Later in 1977, Stephen Gould used statistics to disprove Morton's theory for using skull capacity to rank the intelligence of races. Despite this information, race has become so ingrained into American society that it is still used to separate people to this day. The meaning assigned to the look of Kennewick Man is what fueled a decades-long debate over ownership of his remains and ownership of the past. The remains of Kennewick Man deserved to rest with the Native Americans. This was not the case, and ultimately science and the quest for the white man to gain knowledge was able to assert its power over the Native Americans once again.